Welcome to the Childcare Revolution podcast, where we talk about all things childcare.
I'm Tegan.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Patricia. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Before we go on with our recording, we just wanted to hold a moment of silence in honor of Regis Korchinski-Paquette and all other victims of police brutality and systemic racism in Canada and around the world. And a moment of silence in a podcast is way shorter than in person.
In our previous episode, we were talking about the recommendations made by the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare and the Association of Early Childhood Educators of Ontario in their report. It's called From Reopening to Recovery, where we discussed optimal conditions for childcare to be reopened in Ontario. And today we are very grateful to have a parent guest on board with us to talk about it from a parent's perspective.
We are having our first ever guest on our podcast, so everybody please welcome Livia. She is a law clerk and a paralegal candidate. And she's the mother of Lucy, a very special, to me, 7-year-old. And hi, Livia.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks
for coming.
Thank you for being here. So our goal with this part of the podcast or the episode or whatever we're calling this is to discuss with a parent what especially the recovery plan would mean for your family. Mm-hmm. So before the pandemic, before childcare closed, what was your childcare situation?
Before the pandemic, my daughter, she was enrolled in a before and after program at a daycare at her school. And she's been at daycare since she was 2. So we are very much dependent on childcare to work and to live. Yeah.
And then when childcare closed, were both you and your husband working from home?
So when childcare closed, I was fortunate enough to be able to work from home. My husband, he was deemed essential, so he kept going to work every day, as he still is at the moment. Yeah, but I was lucky enough to be able to do my work from home.
And then working from home and being with a 7-year-old can be very challenging, I bet. What did that look like? What does that look like? Is it still happening?
It's still happening, yeah. And it's I find it to be different every day. So I try to keep the routine as flexible as I can to allow her breaks on days that she doesn't feel like doing schoolwork because she's only 7. I mean, I don't want to force it on her. We try to keep a routine of every day doing some exercises, some provided by the teacher and some not, some from secondary sources, from books that were gifted to us by friends and families, exercises that we find along the way. But the routine, I try to keep it very flexible to allow her breaks, even mental health breaks for her as well. I've noticed a lot of change in that regard. It's very tricky to be able to put out good work while watching your child and making sure she is being kept busy. She is being kept entertained. Her mind is working to the capacity it should be, and she is moving and, doing what a 7-year-old should be doing. So I find that really challenging. And it just goes to show me how much I appreciate the care that she receives on a daily basis.
It's really amazing that you've acknowledged that about Lucy and that you're keeping those things intact and making sure that herself as a whole is being taken care of. And that's the most important thing right now.
Yeah, for sure.
And how did not having childcare affect your own well-being?
Oh, it's very tricky to not have a minute to breathe. When before the pandemic, I was a mother, a law clerk, and a student at the same time, but at separate times. Now I am all at once, which is incredibly hard at times. I am fortunate enough to have support of a partner, so I can watch my lessons and still do my work. But it's incredibly hard.
Especially I personally know Lucy, and I know that she's a bit of a social butterfly.
Yeah.
And I know that she misses being around her friends and around her teachers a lot. So, especially given that she's an only child, right? That can be super challenging as well.
Very true.
Because that makes her super. That can make her really sad.
One of my biggest. I don't want to say issues, but it was a big dilemma for me, was to allow the introduction to technology to keep her occupied and entertained. We don't rely a lot on YouTube or on Messenger or on FaceTime or anything like that. We used to not allow that, but that became a very useful tool when I need to focus on my work and on school or on something that she cannot be part of. That has helped a lot, but it will never substitute having another kid to play with, having a friend to play with. It's different, but we're managing.
We make it work. So when we're talking about reopening childcare, what would give you and your family a sense of safety when sending your daughter back to either childcare or school?
It would make me very, very wary to send my child back to school if the teachers are not properly trained on PPE, on how to handle situations that can be out of control at times. We don't know. And I feel like effective policies have to be implemented at the school, and they have to be followed to ensure that everyone's kept safe. The teachers, the students, the parents, the janitors, everyone. And until there is a clear plan, I don't feel safe enough to send her back.
Yeah, and we're talking a lot about from the care provider and the education provider side of things. We're talking a lot about how those guidelines and that training needs to be on all levels. Like you were saying, it needs to be the caretakers at the school, it needs to be the teachers at the school, but it needs to be the childcare centers that are located inside the schools. Because when we're talking about a building like a public school building, like where I work and where Lucy goes to school and childcare, we're talking about multiple institutions inside one building. And all those institutions have different protocols and procedures for cleaning and sanitizing and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has to be on the same page. And the main goal, the ultimate goal, has to be everyone's safety. So I don't know how that's going to be. And to be honest, I'm waiting on guidance from the government and on guidance from the daycare on how things are going to proceed. And then I will make my own conclusions about it. It's still up in the air. I haven't heard much about it, but I'm sure they're working hard to keep a plan, have a plan in place when the time comes.
And then when we talk about I think that fear and the reluctancy in sending her back is natural instinct, right? You protect yourself and you protect your own.
Definitely.
But there's another thing that we need to protect, which is the very rare childcare spaces in Toronto. Finding childcare is really hard in our city, and if you don't feel safe to send your child back, you should be allowed to, I don't know, and somehow hold your spot for when you do feel safe.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you go back to work, not just working from home, you're going to need that space.
Oh, definitely. And if it ever comes in time in which I have to decide between am I okay enough with their policies to send her back in order not to lose the spot? Or do I just send her back because I can no longer do this? I feel like it would be a dilemma that a lot of families will go through. Is it safe enough to send, or is it only safe enough? Like, I don't know how to explain this properly, but like, I would like to see it like flourish, and I would like to be comfortably saying that, oh no, she is safe, but
Yeah.
we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know anything. Like, I think the parents and our side and your side are both in the dark right now.
Yeah.
I think that government is working on a plan. At least that's what they say. But I think that we need to be more. It needs to be more transparent and open, so that we know
to be
that.
Very transparent, for sure. This is our kids we're talking about. I mean, I don't know, but it has to be very transparent. Otherwise, there is not even a discussion in sending them back.
Yeah. Livia, I'm just a little bit curious. So I know you said that you're working from home now, and but so once they open the economy, like the businesses and everything, how would that look like for you if you don't have childcare? How would that affect your work?
That would be a major problem. I feel like a lot of people are in the same situation right now. What will come first? Are they going to send me back to the office first, or are they going to reopen daycare centers first? I cannot go back to the office if the summer camps and daycares are not open. It is a situation in which you're stuck. You're at the mercy of your employer. Are they going to allow me to keep working from home until there is somewhere for me to send my kid to? Or are they going to force me back to the office?
And that's something else that needs to come from the government, right? Like, guidelines for parents' workplaces need to be clear, and they need to be enforced, because it would not be fair for you to lose your job because you're trying to protect your family's life.
Definitely. There has to be some sort of accommodation in place, because without childcare, there's no way for parents to be focused on work and generating a profit, honestly.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to just get that snippet and just like blare it on like a huge speaker in front of Doug Ford's office. But like, so before the pandemic, a problem that we faced from the childcare provider and the education provider side of things was children would go to school or childcare sick because their parents don't have access to sick leave. And then everybody else would get sick, especially if you're talking about younger children. The other children in the room, the educators, the assistants, everybody could get sick, because that's how children are. They're not, the younger you are, the less you know, or the less you're capable of covering your cough or washing your hands properly, or all of those things. So it is very important that we don't go back to that situation. So we're talking, when we're talking about reopening and recovering, we're talking a lot about sick leave, not only for educators, but also for parents. So do you have access to sick leave?
So I'm finally in a position that I am fortunate enough to have an employer that understands my sick needs and the sick needs of my child. So this is the first year that I have not used my sick days. And we are only in May. So I have enough sick days to cover my needs and my child needs with the current employer that I have. However, in the past, that has been a major issue, especially when Lucy was a little younger. She was very prone to ear infections. And of course, I didn't feel comfortable sending her to school with a fever and something that I know could infect someone else. So in previous years, last year, for example, I ran out of sick days in May. This year, we're on a good track, but it's a very, very distinct situation, in a very uncommon one. most of my friends that have kids don't have enough sick days to cover their needs and their kids' needs. I like to say that I am lucky enough to have an employer that understands, but it's very uncommon.
It shouldn't be. That's the same thing that we were talking about when we were talking about access to sick leave for educators. It shouldn't be luck. It shouldn't be a luxury to have access to proper sick days. It should be a right.
Absolutely
right? Because
not. Yeah.
we all get sick. Our kids all get sick. And like you're talking from a perspective of someone who is co-parenting a child, right? You have someone
And
else
only
with
one
you.
child. Yeah.
Yeah. What if you are a single parent of multiple children? I think that there needs to be space for especially mothers to be able to take that time, keep their jobs, keep their wages, and keep their sick children at home.
Definitely. But I do think that something that's going to come out of this pandemic is if anything good, it's going to open people's eyes to how health is important and how health should come first over profit, over stats, over anything really. It should be your health, your family's health.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well.
I think that there was a lot, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, like back in March, a lot of people were calling coronavirus the huge, the big equalizer because it was putting everybody on the same page. And I disagree with that because it's not an equalizer because people are experiencing this in very different circumstances, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But also, for me, the pandemic is the big revealer. It's revealing all the holes in our system. We don't have enough. Look at the situation with the long-term care homes and elderly homes. Like that's unacceptable that what's going on in them is going on, right? And that was due to lots of things, but including lack of inspection from the government. And I don't think that we can move on from this and actually recover and avoid it happening again if we don't look at the things that the pandemic is revealing, all these holes. So I think that you're absolutely right that like we're going to come out of this with at least like access to sick leave being changed. I mean, there's a proposal for everybody to get 10 sick days a year coming from the federal government. It hasn't become law yet, and it hasn't. Today is May 30th, so as far as I know, it hasn't become law yet because I don't know when we're going to be able to post this episode. And I would love to see that happen because, especially for childcare, 10 sick days doesn't seem like enough.
No,
so
it does not.
No.
Nope.
Even for parents, because their kids can get sick at
Exactly.
childcare, and then they bring it home to you guys, sadly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
It's happened a couple times.
No.
And there is when I think about sick time, especially this might be a little off topic, but when I think about sick time for educators, we're talking about a sector that majority of the sector is women, and we have our own health needs that people making the laws, which the majority of that is men, don't have and don't consider, right? So we would need even more sick days if we were considering that, if we were trying to level the playing field. I want to see a man work with horrible cramps that go down your legs. They can't do that. Oh. Anyways, so when we're talking about reopening of childcare, there's probably what's going to happen is not all children are going to be able to come back at the same time.
Mhm.
So we were just wondering, what are your thoughts on a possible system of eligibility for families? Like, who should go first? Who should be like? How do you look at that when you
I feel
read it?
it's so hard to comment on something like this because I I don't live in other people's realities, but I do feel like single moms should be looked at first. How are they going to make a living if they can't go to work, if there's no care for their children? It's insane. So I feel like single moms should go first. That's my priority. I will work from home and keep her home as much as I can. If that means other kids get to go and other people get to go to work, I don't have a problem with that. I don't care about being first. I'm super chill about this. That's not my place. Yeah.
That's a really important point to make, because again, this is not affecting people in the same way, right? And your job is a job that can be done from home. But
absolutely. I'm super fortunate to be able to do that, and also to have a partner who is still working at the time. At this time, we are working on 2 incomes, and I know that people are working on 0 incomes right now. So I cannot be selfish and ask to be first when I know there's people in worse situations than me.
Yes, but you're not being selfish, though. If you get the opportunity, childcare in general is already very hard to get into.
Very true.
So I don't think you should ever feel selfish about needing to take a spot. It's honestly up to the government to provide those spaces for all families to have access to it. It's not up to you to decide.
It's a problem with the system. Yeah. It's a problem with the system.
I agree.
And it's amazing that you think that way.
Yeah. And I hope that there's a lot of parents out there that think that way. Because like, if I think about someone with a job like mine and my partner's job, my partner is a sous chef at a restaurant, right? You cannot do that remotely. You cannot do that via Zoom. And I'm a preschool teacher. I cannot preschool teach via Zoom.
Yeah.
I can have quick calls. I can see their faces, but that's not the same. So those are just 2 examples of jobs that need to be done in person, and that whose children should maybe have access to care first. So when we reopen with less children, childcare fees are already super high. Even if you are on a before and after program, they are very high. To make up for the lack of parent fees, the report that we're talking about recommends that the reopening of childcare be publicly funded, because otherwise the fees would have to go insanely high for parents who haven't been working necessarily for the past 2 months, or have been making less, or whatever. What would it mean to you and to your family if, when Lucy goes back to childcare was free?
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I don't want to curse, but it would be amazing.
You can curse. We are
explicit. All right. It would be fucking amazing. It would allow us a financial freedom that we've never had. It's simply that. We have never had to not pay childcare. Like that's the money we always set aside at the end of the month, because without that we can't go on. If that was free, mind you, I had Lucy very early. I was 23 when I had her, so it's safe to say that I was not financially stable at the time. So it's always been a little bit of a struggle to be able to afford childcare. It would be amazing. It would be so freeing and refreshing to see, oh my God, this is the world I want to live in, the world in which childcare is free and of quality.
Yeah, when I think about this, we live in Toronto, and Toronto has the highest childcare fees in the country, and Toronto also has, if not the highest, one of the highest rents in the country, right? So those 2 things, I think, would be the majority of people's budgets, like if you have children. And if those 2 things had intervention from the government, so that there was a limit, or there's funding, so people weren't spending as much, people could actually save and you can start a college fund for your child, or you can move to a bigger place, or you can think
Exactly.
about getting a car. Like, there's all these things that don't come because it's impossible to save.
Exactly. It's the
Mm-hmm.
financial freedom to choose how you're going to spend your money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And people
that
get really scared that that money is not going to be put back into the economy, but just by the way you were talking, it was clearly going to be
It was
back.
benefits the economy. You would spend more money on other stuff than childcare, and you will focus on your career more, on your professional life more.
Of
or
course, and we
even
would be able to do more things as a family.
Yeah.
Traveling, discovering, moving
yeah,
into a place that suits our needs. Everything their family should do.
yeah, it's again, like the pandemic being the big revealer of how broken our systems are.
And how much we
Um,
know nothing about really our economy and how fragile it is.
yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Very, very well put. So when we're talking also about reopening of childcare, the recommendation in the report is that educators and staff get trained on trauma-informed practice, meaning that we would be able to meet the needs of these children that have been cooped up, and maybe in unsafe situations for 3 months. How important do you think that is, like personally as a parent?
Oh, it's paramount. There is absolutely no doubt that there will be challenges with respect to mental health of the children when they get to return. And I
Because I
think,
think we're talking a lot about economic recovery, and we're talking a lot about the financial side of things, but the social and emotional recovery of children, families, and everybody, I think, needs to be uh, made a priority as well. Because if we just have a population of people who, yes, were able to recover financially, but are all depressed and anxious and having panic attacks all the time, that's not gonna work for very long.
Yeah, and just to mention the image of children being like quarantine in like small chalked square on their playground, and they can't be in contact with their friends or their educator in some centers that did reopen like around the world, and that just breaks my heart.
Oh yeah, because like we have to think about not only the trauma of being cooped up for uh, 3 months, but also the trauma from maybe coming back to childcare and not being able to play the same way or interact the same way.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Uh,
Their
life as
ideas.
they knew has changed.
for
Is no
sure.
more. Everything that they were used to has been taken away from them. And I find that there will be definitely long term effects on their mental health
Mm-hmm.
if not treated properly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that sums it up beautifully. Also, a big thing that I think we should bring up is it's kind of an expectation of the sector that even in regular life, pre-quarantine, pre-pandemic, that educators do preparation and planning for their programs on their own time, right? You do it through your break, you do it, you take it home, and preparing to go back is going to planning to go back. All of that is going to take a lot of time and a lot of brain power.
Yeah.
So, I
Definitely, you guys should be
think
compensated for that.
exactly. I was gonna say, like, I hope you agree that we should be paid for that time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Or even given that time to begin with. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh.
not having time. I think not having time for planning or for training. Uh, if the government even suggests that, I think that they're just plain dumb. I'm sorry. It's just that's unacceptable. That's unfeasible. It's
Yeah.
not. It doesn't make any sense. It
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense. It's not
Yeah.
reopening a golf course. It's not reopening the fucking marina.
It's not
It's
reopening, it's an opening, because if you were reopening, it would just be the same way it was before.
exactly.
And it's not.
That was
Yes.
beautiful. Yeah.
Mm.
I had a little heart palpitation with that. Oh.
I know.
Calm down. Our health system's already overwhelmed. Don't be having no heart attacks.
So, Livia, as we restructure and prepare to open childcare, what would you like to see for your child's educators? Like, what would you like to see for their work conditions, for example?
I want them to be able to do their jobs safely again. Everything that they studied for, everything they aim for, I want them to be able to achieve that. With a pandemic, with all the difficulties, with everything, there has to be support for them. And as a parent, I'm here for whatever I can do to help the educators, the daycare center, everything. Really, it's such a challenging time for everyone, and I do think the educators got a bit of the hardest part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one knows what's happening really. There has been a lack of transparency from the government to the families and to the educators, and also I feel like we're trying to figure out things as they go. There has to be support for them, otherwise they won't be able to do a good job.
Absolutely. Part of the recommendations for from the report is a minimum wage for ECEs. Do you have any idea of what the average is for like for hourly pay for RECEs in Ontario? Just out of curiosity, do you have any
Can I
idea?
take a wild guess?
Yeah.
Yes.
$25 an hour.
Oh, so that is the proposed amount in the report, because the
All
average
right.
in Ontario is between $17 and $19 an hour.
No, let's get to 25. We can do that. We can make that happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's pretty awesome to hear someone else say that, someone who's not an educator.
I am very, very shocked that it's not higher. I am not gonna lie. That comes to me as a surprise.
And like people, there are.
Oh, you go?
Go on. Sorry, you go.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I don't think a lot of people know this about educators because it's not something that we generally bring up. I don't even think we feel comfortable discussing it because there's just so many things that we get told about, and there's a lot of privacy issues as well.
So to make it clear, there's not a minimum wage for ECEs at the moment?
No. So there's a minimum wage from the province, and unfortunately there are a lot of RECEs out there that are making $14 an hour. There is a very large portion of them that are making just that.
That is insane.
The recommendation on the report is that childcare centers and operators get the funding to ensure a minimum of $25 an hour for all registered early childhood educators. Because, I mean, it's not like we woke up one day and be like, I'm a registered early childhood educator. Like, we knew each other when I was in school, and we knew each other as I was applying for the College of EC. So you saw how hard I worked and how big the struggle was.
And how qualified you are. Like, you know, it's not the same raising 20 human beings 5 days a week as working at the mall. Like, it's not the same.
Mm-hmm. And even though we always say that early childhood educators didn't go into this sector because of the money, we shouldn't take their work for granted anyways.
Yeah.
It's not. I think I can't remember now if it was Canada or Brazil, but there was a politician that said that, I think it was in Brazil. It sounds like Brazil. A politician that said that teachers go into teaching for love, out of love, and that is disgusting and unacceptable, because
everybody
teachers
goes into positions for love.
There's people that go for the love of money.
But some people just love what they do, and that means they shouldn't be paid because they're getting love
exactly.
out of it.
It shouldn't be one or the other.
Love doesn't put money on the table. Love doesn't feed your children. Love doesn't pay your rent. And it's not like the work that we're doing is not essential. We say a lot on this. I say this a lot on my real life and on our talks and all our webinars and all of that. Everyone depends on someone who depends on childcare. It's ridiculous that it's underfunded and unappreciated and undervalued, because you cannot go to your doctor if your doctor's kids are not being cared for, if your doctor's kids don't have somewhere to go to be. You cannot go to the bank to solve your financial issues or to take out money or whatever if the people that work at the bank don't have a place to send their children. And we're not talking about cows and goats. It's not like just put them in a space that has food, water, and a place for them to poop. We're talking about future people, right? They're children right now. Children are people, and one day they're going to be tax-paying, job-holding,
voters,
childbearing people. Exactly, voters. Do we have any other questions? Do you want to add something else, Livia?
No, but I do want to say that I truly hope that the moment that we're living in currently, that something good comes out of it, and that this something good is more recognition for educators, because if there is a time for things to change, the time is now. We're all depending on that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. I know that a lot of the ECEs that hear our podcast are going to be very touched by your words, because
love you, long time educators. You guys are amazing.
And Livia, I didn't say this earlier, but like when we were talking about reopening childcare and not having enough space for all the children, and maybe you don't think that you're like in a position of priority, but you deserve it, and all the children deserve it. And parents and educators, we fight this fight together.
Exactly.
For sure, we're on the same side, for sure.
Go on. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say that, like, I meant more in the sense that I don't feel a rush to go back in as much as other people do, because I'm in a comfortable position that I'm still getting paid. But I do need my spot for sure. Like, I can't let it go. No.
Yeah.
And it's also like, it shouldn't be a choice. It shouldn't have to be a choice especially for mothers, being with their children or having a career, right?
Oh,
like,
exactly.
Because usually it falls on the mother. If we're talking about a heteronormative couple, it will fall on the mom to do the caring, to do the educating, to do the homeschooling, to do the whatever, especially because we're talking, it's 2020 and the gender wage gap is still very real.
Very real.
So usually mothers will have jobs that pay less than fathers, and then their work is less valuable, quote unquote, so they wouldn't go back.
Yeah.
So do we have any final words before we wrap up our episode? Again, I asked this.
We want to give a humongous thank you for joining us today and sharing your perspective. It's something that we need to hear, that other parents need to hear. And
that other educators need to hear, for sure.
Yes.
And the government needs to hear.
Yeah.
Yes, listen to me, government.
I think that's the biggest thing, is that parents are our biggest allies. The government's going to listen to you the most.
Yeah.
For sure.
Stephen Lecce, or whoever on his team controls his Instagram, was on Instagram liking my post and the podcast post at night. And it was about the report, so you can't say that you haven't seen the report, because I also know it's been delivered to your office. Do something. Do something.
Come on,
do
Steve.
The right thing. Come on, Stevie.
Come on, Steve.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. You are a sweet baby angel.
Thank you. You too.
I think Patricia has a story to share.
Yes, I do. I have a childcare story to share. It's from my first placement back in winter 2015. And there was this little girl in the toddler room that I was doing my placement in. And she was very sassy. You know, when you have a toddler that's very sassy? And she was very much going through the phase that she would imitate all the adults around her. And there was this staff in this room that every time when she would go for her midday break, because at that center they had 2 15-minute breaks, she would go into the closet, get her purse, put it under her arm, and go, "Okay, ladies, I'm going on my break." So one day she does that, and before she comes back on her break, this little girl goes in the trauma center, gets one of the play purses, puts a bunch of stuff in it, usually stuff that made no sense because that's what toddlers do, comes to me, asks me to zip it up. I zip it up. She puts it under her arm and walks towards the block center going, "Okay, ladies, I'm going on my break." And it was the sweetest, the cutest, and the funniest thing ever. She would like shake her bum as she was walking. It was so funny.
The Childcare Revolution podcast is not affiliated with any universities, colleges, associations, or institutions. Just a couple of passionate educators speaking some thoughts into the air. Thank you for joining us. Please like, follow, and subscribe to listen to more episodes of the Childcare Revolution. Send your childcare stories, questions, and comments to our email. And it's childcarerevolutionpod@gmail.com.
We can now be found on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Apple Podcasts, stop being such a bitch and let us upload. And you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye just for me. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening.